Hey gang, I decided to put together a very short video for you about the globalization unit. So here's what we got. Um, I'm going to go through the questions with you and I'm going to go through the answers. So that way you are prepared for the globalization test tomorrow. So we asked you to think about what goes into making a shoe. Well, it's a lot of things. It's a lot of products, and none of those products are made in the same country or the same place. So that's why globalization exists, because goods can be made in one area where the other goods that make up that product come from all over the world. So defining globalization, right? It's international trade and the spread and exchange of ideas, cultures, and goods. So that's our definition of globalization. So we have two major negative impacts from globalization. We read the first couple pages. Remember, it was talking about the coronavirus pandemic, COVID. And so globalization is good, but there are some negative aspects of it when you think about how COVID impacted globalization. Now, we're going to take a look at the impact of globalization right here. So when you think about it, we have many, many, many things that spread because of globalization, excuse me, the hiccups, outside of just goods. Okay, trade is not just exchanging goods. Trade exchanges ideas, inventions, concepts. Globalization includes the spreading of culture, food, etc. Food's right there. Globalization spreads languages. People all over the world speak different languages and know different languages because of globalization. The ability to communicate with businesses and people in other countries. It's a global world out there. Religion. The idea that religion has spread all over the world too. Globalization. The clothing you wear, the music you listen to, political ideas, literature, which is a big word for books, all of those things spread because of globalization. Many of these are good. Some of these are not so good. It just depends on how you look at things. Now, when we looked at, let me scroll down a little bit. When we looked at free trade, and when we looked at free trade and we looked at what a tariff was, remember, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Right now, we're seeing a lot of tariff wars going on between the United States and other countries. And what that does is that raises the price of goods that are foreign coming into the United States. But the companies don't pay that bill. We pay it. So when there's a 25% tariff on Chinese goods, that means if you buy something for $1, it's $1.25, and you're the one who's buying it, so you're the one who's absorbing that tariff, which is unfortunate. And so what globalization really created was this idea of free trade, the idea that we could send goods all over the world. And that people would be, when I say free trade, I don't mean like financially free. I mean the ability to trade all over the world. So we get goods from many countries all over the world, and those countries get goods from us. So we keep going. We looked at NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or as my class, NAFTA. It was an agreement between the United States and Canada and Mexico. And it's been replaced by President Trump. But the concept was this: we're going to have no tariffs, or we're not going to have tariffs between the countries, because that way we want the money to stay in North America. So since Mexico is our neighbor to the south, Canada is our neighbor to the north, the idea was that the North American Free Trade Agreement would be less tariffs, not high prices, so that way we could have goods exchanged all over North America. You remember reading about my Volkswagen story? Well, again, the engine's German, but the car was manufactured in Mexico and then imported to the United States. It's less expensive to import a car from Mexico to the United States than from Germany to the United States. That's why. Now, some people looked at NAFTA and said that's not a good thing, right? Some people think, well, wait a minute. NAFTA, all of a sudden, jobs are now going to Mexico and they're not in the United States and Canada because labor laws are different. And one of the things, too, is that, more companies will move to Mexico. So then there's less jobs in the United States. There's less job opportunities. There are less factories. There's less business. So some people say that NAFTA does not do good because now you have countries like Mexico and Canada that have jobs that used to be in America, and the money's not here. We want that money to be here. We want the goods and the jobs and everything to be created in the home country. So some people think that's not good. So that's that. Now, we have this massive list, right? Globalization has benefits for both rich and poor countries. I really don't think we need to go through this whole list, but know 5 of these. Okay, we know that globalization has lifted people with low income out of poverty, almost more than a billion people. Now it says almost a billion. It's likely more than a billion now. Countries that didn't have goods before now have goods. Companies are international. The world's more connected. Now that we're trading with other countries, we're friendlier with these other countries, because why would you trade with an enemy? You wouldn't. And then all of us now have more choices of goods. Goods become generally cheaper because now we can have goods made in areas where there's not as much money, labor laws cost. That definitely goes to the minimum wage question when we looked at, because minimum wage it's good and it's not. Having a low minimum wage is good if you're making the product. You don't have to pay the workers as much. You make more profit. But it's bad because the workers don't make a lot of money. So in Asia and Africa, where the minimum wages are practically non-existent, that's why a lot of our clothing and a lot of our shoes, a lot of our things are made in those continents, because the labor laws are very, very different than here in the United States. So it's cheaper to make those products there. You can pay workers less there, so you can make more of a profit here. So these are the pros of globalization. And then we've got some consequences, right? So all of a sudden, because workers aren't treated the same in other countries because of different labor laws, lifestyles change as nations spread their lifestyle and their ways. It changes the home nation's lifestyle and culture. We also see that, okay, well, if you're going to have these massive factories in countries, looks like you're going to have to build them. Pollution. You're going to have to knock down some areas to build it. Now we also see a big one, that nations are really reliant on each other, in some cases too reliant, because COVID was a perfect example, right? The whole world shut down because of COVID, and every country pretty much relied on every other country. So you had difficulties trading, getting goods. It was a mess. Also, globalization doesn't help every country. Some countries, they just aren't affected by it. They don't have the ability to build those factories. They don't have the access to cheaper goods. They don't have the ability to create industry in these countries, or they don't have resources to export. So it doesn't really help. And so, again, we've looked at all of these things, these negatives, no 5 of these, okay? Globalization and coronavirus, again, we saw that. And I think this is a pretty cool little political cartoon, in case you didn't know. So it shows the world economy, and then this is obviously a wrecking ball. COVID-19 is the wrecking ball, and it destroyed the world economy. So that's how globalization is also impacted, right? Now, we keep going, and we looked at how some countries are trying to go against globalization because they want their nations to be dominant. Again, nationalism. Again, the minimum wage map down here. We keep going. And then shipping. This was huge. This is very important. With the creation of these massive cargo ships, shipping goods is so cheap. You can fit 10,000 pairs of sneakers in one of those containers. And the cost of shipping those is 10 cents per item in some cases. It's so cheap. What are in these containers? All of this stuff. Everything are in these containers. And these ships now are world trade. These ships, these cargo ships, enable world trade. But there are some issues. Yes, that's happened before, where boats capsize and bad weather, creates issues, and containers fall off the ships. There are over 100 containers in the ocean somewhere at the bottom. I don't know what's in them, but they're down there. And then we looked at the big one. The Ever Given in the Suez Canal. When the Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal, more than 100 ships were waiting in the Mediterranean Sea for 6 days. 369 ships waited to go through. It cost the world economy it cost the United States $9.6 billion in goods. Each one of these little dots is one of those. They have hundreds of containers on them. In some cases, there are thousands of containers on these ships. And these containers, well, if you're on one of these ships and you're waiting to get the goods, obviously you don't have them. And then the cost will go up. Or maybe the goods are no longer in need or demand. So everything changes because of this. But this has also allowed us the ability to ship goods very cheaply. This is the Suez Canal, by the way, just to give you an idea. And again, would you rather go 120 miles through the Suez Canal from Asia to Europe, or from the eastern side of Africa to Europe? Would you rather go 15,000 miles around the coast of Africa? No way, the canal. And so when this canal clogged up by the Ever Given, big traffic jam. Big traffic jam. And that slowed. It's globalization. Get it? Slow. Yeah. Okay. Globalization. We go through. And unfortunately, remember, globalization is impacted by conflicts. The war in Gaza affected global trade. In 2023, there were 221 container ships that went through the Suez Canal between January 4th and January 11th. And then in 2024, a year later, it was less because of the Houthi rebels and people firing onto the ships and trying to pirate the ships, people trying to take the goods off the ships, ransom. So foreign conflict affects globalization because then some shipping companies don't want to travel in that area. And also some cases, well, people don't want to ship goods to that area. Russia, Ukraine's a great example of a negative effect of globalization. Russia is the largest producer of oil and natural gas in all of Europe and Asia. People don't want to buy their oil and natural gas because they are fighting Ukraine. So then Russia doesn't send that oil and natural gas. They don't make the money. Those people who have jobs aren't working. And then on top of it, people who need those goods, well, they're not getting them. And people who need those other nations, well, they're not getting what they need. Ukraine is the largest producer of wheat in all of Europe. They're at war. They're not exporting a whole lot of wheat. So a lot of the world is affected by this. Okay? Starbucks. I hope you enjoyed reading about Starbucks because I freaking hate it. I hate Starbucks. I hate Starbucks. If we think about an impact that Starbucks has had on globalization, okay, well, now people know Starbucks, so nobody goes to the local coffee shop. They go to Starbucks to get their mocha chocolate frino. And because of that, small coffee shops lose their business. And then other businesses have to adapt. Starbucks has pretty much created a culture. They've created a normalcy. They've created an experience. They've made other countries even try to adopt. So even in other countries, right, number of Starbucks globally. Like, why do they need Starbucks in Saudi Arabia or India? Why do they need Starbucks coffee in Turkey when Turkish coffee is its own thing? Well, it's the Starbucks effect. Some people look at the brand and they think, I want the brand, and they want the experience, and they want to show status. And Starbucks knows that. If you think about it, Starbucks doesn't even put their name on anything anymore. It's just a logo. That's how important the logo has become. So what Starbucks has done, and this is a Starbucks in Europe, which again, many cities oppose it because small towns and villages that had coffee shops, they have to adapt or they go out of business. And then you see the effect also is other companies also try to mirror Starbucks. I hate Starbucks. I hate everything about it. I just do. It's awful. Whatever. Just know two effects Starbucks has had on globalization, whether it's good or bad. I don't care. Obviously, I think it's horrible, but that's just me. Oh, and don't forget, you guys own over 1,600 t-shirts and 580 pairs of shoes. These questions are fair game for the quiz, test, whatever it is we're giving. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good night.